One of the challenges of traditional antidepressants is the burden of side effects with daily chronic administration. Reassuringly, with the recent data with COMP360 and 005 and 006, what we've shown is a profile of safety that is generally safe and well tolerated. And the vast majority of adverse events occurred on the day of administration and resolved by the next day. They were generally mild to moderate and included headache, fatigue, nausea, visual hallucination, and those were somewhat dose dependent, but did resolve in most cases quite frequently. They were transient, and so it suggests a very tolerable profile for patients. Unfortunately, suicidality is part and parcel of a diagnosis of treatment-resistant depression, and one of the reasons why we so urgently need new options for these patients who are at risk of suicide. And so by nature of being diagnosed with treatment-resistant depression, these patients are at some ongoing risk of suicidal ideation. And because of that, we are very encouraged and reassured with the part A of both studies now of 005 and 06, as well as the longer term follow-up out to 26 weeks, that we've seen no imbalance across any of our treatment arms in the rate of suicidality. And overall, the rate was less than 1%. So far across COMP005, where we have the part A data looking at the effect of a single administration 6 weeks later, the part A data of 006, looking at the effects of 2 fixed administrations 6 weeks later, and then the part B 26-week data from 005, looking at the results out to that time point of 26 that may include a single retreatment. It indicates that 1 or 2 initial treatments of COMP360 might have a quite long-lasting benefit. To understand what the frequency of treatment may look like if this product is approved and used in real-world clinical care, it will be helpful to have the 26-week Part B data of 006 as well, which also includes a potential retreatment if patients have not yet remitted at the end of Part A or if they have relapsed. And so that will really be important data to inform clinicians and payers what the ultimate frequency of treatment may look like, but we do expect this to be an episodic treatment. In our study, patients overwhelmingly had no prior psychedelic experience with psilocybin or otherwise. Across both of our phase 3 studies, 005 and 006, the overwhelming majority of patients had no prior psychedelic experience, only between 4 to 6% or so across the arms. Partly because of that, but also because of the novel nature of receiving COMP360 psilocybin, it is important that patients are well prepared ahead of time for what they may expect on that administration day. That involves meeting the treatment team, building some trust and rapport, getting some basic treatment education, and being instructed in some basic techniques that patients can use on that administration day so that they can navigate that experience with the support of the team within a controlled and supervised healthcare setting. One of the questions we get as people digest this data and they understand the really exciting potential of COMP360 for people living with treatment-resistant depression is how will this get to patients? Given that this is such a new paradigm of care that does involve a multi-hour administration of COMP360 in a supervised medical setting, and the importance of preparing patients adequately for that experience and following them up. Many have questions about who will be able to deliver this treatment and how can sites prepare so that they're ready upon a potential FDA approval of COMP360. There are now more than 7,000 sites in the US that treat patients with Spravato. And it's helpful to note that a room that's used today to deliver Spravato is essentially what would be required to monitor a patient for multiple hours receiving COMP360. And that Spravato is typically delivered with a team-based model of care delivery, which is very applicable and translatable to what will be necessary for COMP360. These sites typically operate with a multidisciplinary team that includes a prescribing psychiatrist, other licensed healthcare providers, medical assistants, and administrative support that are already equipped, if they are delivering Spravato today, to deliver COMP360 upon approval. For our initial indication of treatment-resistant depression, the COMP005 and COMP006 phase 3 trials represent the last of the data that we will need to submit our NDA to the Psychiatry Division at FDA for a potential approval. Beyond treatment-resistant depression, though, we are also really excited to move forward our program in PTSD. We are now initiating a late-stage trial in PTSD, and important to recognize that this is a very large patient population that is very underserved. There are about 13 million people in the US living with PTSD. There has not been a new approved product this century for PTSD. So we are really excited to move that program forward and hope to develop a new option for those living with PTSD as well as for TRD. Many have also raised questions about how you effectively blind a study of a psychedelic substance because of the acute subjective effects that are quite obvious, certainly relative to an inert placebo. FDA is quite aware of this issue, and they published draft guidance back in June of 2023 to give some guidance on what they would consider to be an adequately designed total body of evidence to submit an application for a psychedelic treatment. And that included one study versus an inert placebo, which is inherently unblinding, but a second study where you compare your active dose versus lower doses of your active drug to provide an active comparator. And that's the design that we used in phase 2B with 25, 10, and 1 milligram arms that we've carried through into our COMP006 study of 25, 10, and 1 milligram. That, in addition to recruiting a population that is largely naive to psychedelic experiences, and as I mentioned earlier in our trials, somewhere between 4 and 6% of patients had any prior psychedelic experience. The use of blinded independent raters as a way of measuring our primary endpoint, and the instructions that patients are given in that 006 study that they will receive some dose of psilocybin, which is true, does help to manage expectation and maintain the blind of the study. It is not unique to psychedelics that there are issues of unblinding. It's something that really is present in the study of any psychiatric drug with subjective endpoints. It's true for antidepressants. It's true for antipsychotics. There has been more focus for psychedelics, and FDA has acknowledged these are difficult trials to blind. But the design that I mentioned that's been pioneered by our Chief Medical Officer, Dr. Guy Goodwin, in phase 2 and carried into phase 3, we believe is the best design to be able to effectively maintain that blind. For patients living with treatment-resistant depression, there currently is only one marketed pharmacologic option, which is Spravato. That is a treatment that, while relatively rapidly acting, represents a high burden on patients and their caregivers, given the frequency of induction treatment, as well as the frequency of maintenance treatment, which we are required to maintain the effect. COMP360, with the rapidity and durability that we have now demonstrated in phase 3, with the efficacy detectable on the first day following administration, and the durability of 1 or 2 treatments out to at least 6 months, represents an entirely new paradigm of care, potentially for patients if COMP360 is approved, that should fundamentally shift the treatment algorithm for those living with this condition.